This we'll defend are the words that encapsulate the ideals of the United States Army. It was first used by the War Office of the Continental Congress during the American Revolutionary War in 1778. And it has been our guiding motto for over 200 years. Today, it is inscribed on a scroll above the cap of freedom on the Department of the Army emblem to signify the Army's constant readiness to defend and preserve the United States of America. It is our shield. This we'll defend means we are there when we are needed, regardless of the mission. We are trusted Army professionals who are there when our country calls upon us. Our shared love of country is a powerful motivation for our service to the nation. We are the faces of freedom, life, and liberty. We serve not to promote war, but to preserve peace. This we'll defend is a statement of our commitment in our oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and its citizens. The first line of that oath being, I do solemnly swear that I will support
and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this oath.
This is why we serve.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the graduation ceremony of the United States Army Sergeant Major Academy, Sergeant Major's Course, Class 65. The Resident Sergeant Major course is a 10-month program of instruction designed to prepare senior non-commissioned officers for assignments and positions throughout the Department of Defense and partner nations. Class 65 consists of 406 students from all components of the United States Army, 37 international students from 30 partner countries, and 10 students from the United States Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Air National Guard. Today, as we graduate Class 65, the Sergeant Major Academy will proudly add 453 senior non-commissioned officers to its growing roll of alumni. The members of the official party for today's ceremony are Sergeant Major of the Army, Daniel Daly, the Command Sergeant Major of the Training and Doctrine Command, Command Sergeant Major David Davenport, the Command Sergeant Major of the United States Army Sergeant Major Academy, Command Sergeant Major Dennis DeFries, and the Director of the Sergeant Major's course, Command Sergeant Major Gary Coleman, Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the entrance of the official party and remain standing for the invocation given by Chaplain Roger McKay, Jr. and the playing of our national anthem.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning to honor the achievements of these outstanding leaders who've completed the rigorous journey that is the Sergeant's Major course, and to give thanks to you for your many blessings upon which brought them to this point. Thank you, Lord, for the blessings of perseverance and resolve, which saw them through the countless hours of sacrifice in order to achieve this very significant milestone. Thank you also for the patience and the hard work of the instructors, whose effort ensured these graduates would be successful in the course and set them up for success as they move on to greater leadership opportunities. We ask your blessing upon this graduation ceremony, each graduate and their families as they share this moment of joy and as they continue to set a great example of success and leadership for others to follow. May your blessing continue to be upon them as they move forward in all their future endeavors. It's in Christ Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
Please be seated. We would like to give a heartfelt welcome to the families, friends, and special guests of the graduating class. We'd also like to recognize the distinguished guests who honor us here today. Joining us today are Ms. Jane DeFries, spouse of Command Sergeant Major Dennis DeFries. Command Sergeant Major Mrs. Joe Pritchard, USASMA Deputy Commandant. Our distinguished guests are Brigadier General Joanne Sheridan, Assistant Adjutant General, Louisiana National Guard, accompanied by Brigadier General Mike Ryan, U.S. Army retired, and Command Sergeant Major Joe Fernald, U.S. Army retired. Our international guests include Warrant Officer Anthony Lysette, Sergeant Major of the Jamaican Defense Force, Warrant Officer Yoshiaki Suzuki, Sergeant Major of the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force, Command Sergeant Major Petrus Donkers, Sergeant Major of the Royal Netherlands Army, Warrant Officer 4 Krzysztof Gadowski, Sergeant Major of the Polish Land Forces, Chief Warrant Officer Ung Siak Ping, Sergeant Major of the Singaporean Armed Forces. Other countries are represented by Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Moore, Australian Army, Warrant Officer Emerson Schuneman, Brazilian Army, Lieutenant Colonels Frank Bayer, German Army, and Martin Herter, German Air Force. Command Sergeant Major Shane Voot, New Zealand Army. Command Sergeant Major Kenneth Felden, Swedish Army. Other distinguished guests are Command Sergeant Major Luther Thomas, United States Army Reserve. Command Sergeant Major Harry Bennett, U.S. Army Civilian Affairs and Psychological Operations Command. Command Sergeant Major Jesse Sharp, U.S. Army Tank and Automotive Command. Command Sergeant Major Daniel Jennings, Tennessee Army National Guard, State Command Sergeant Major. Command Sergeant Major Philip Stringfield, Georgia State Command Sergeant Major. Command Sergeant Major Stefan Watson, U.S. Army Network Enterprise Technology Command. Command Sergeant Major Dennis Woods, U.S. Army Center for Initial Military Training. Command Sergeant Major Kevin Green, 85th Regional Support Command, United States Army Reserve. Command Sergeant Major Jay Preston, 87th Regional Support Command, United States Army Reserve. Command Sergeant Major Paul Hill, 95th Training Division, United States Army Reserve. Command Sergeant Major Robert Reedy, 108th Training Command, United States Army Reserve. Sergeant Major Al Hobbs, U.S. Army retired, former USASMA Battalion Commander and member of the USASMA Hall of Honor. Ms. Sofia Gonzalez, Security Service Federal Credit Union. And a very special guest, Colonel Joseph Ostrowitzki, U.S. Army retired, 5th USASMA Commandant, and a member of the USASMA Hall of Honor, accompanied by Ms. Jane Ostrowitzki. The Sergeant Major Academy is proud to call El Paso home. During their tenure, students of the Sergeant Major course have historically made significant contributions to this vibrant community through volunteer efforts. This class continued in that fine tradition. In recognition of Class 65's outstanding support, the El Paso community, the Armed Forces Committee of the Greater El Paso Chamber of Commerce presents to the Academy and Class 65 a scroll which includes the names of each graduate. This scroll will rest alongside the scrolls of all prior classes on the walls of the academic south wing. Additionally, each student will receive a copy of the scroll as a memento of their time here in El Paso. The Academy wishes to thank the Chambers for giving this gift and looks forward to its ongoing mutual support relationship with the Sun City.
On behalf of the Armed Forces Chair for the Greater El Paso Chamber, our CEO, Richard Dayub, I am John Bailey. And I want to welcome or congratulate all the Sergeant Majors today for their completion of the course and tell you how great it is to have this many people in here to represent the great city of El Paso and the great state of Texas. We really appreciate all the effort and the work that's been done by this new Sergeant Major, Class 65, to really help continue to grow the city of El Paso. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Commandant, Command Sergeant Major DeFries.
Good morning, distinguished guests, family, and friends of Class 65. Thank you all for coming to help us honor and recognize these senior NCOs as they graduate from the United States Army Sergeant Major Academy. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I would like to thank some people and groups that made this possible. First, a big thanks to the Neiman family and the Abundant Living Faith Center staff for enduring our Army's contracting process and not giving up on us, and for allowing us to use this beautiful facility. Thanks to the city of El Paso, beautiful Sun City, for their continued support of USASMA and our soldiers, and to the organizations here to honor the award recipients. Go ahead. Thanks to the 1st Armored Division Band for making this ceremony special for the graduates and their families. And finally, thanks to the staff and faculty of USASMA. For Ron Frazier, who wrangles about 50 VIPs during this week, the operations section led by Jeff Davis, who have set this all up and ensured that we have a great ceremony. So thanks to all their hard work over this past week. The sergeants major sitting here getting ready to graduate are a special group. Their list of accomplishments while here are long, and I won't list them all, but I'll highlight a few. More than 4,500 hours of volunteer service by the students and their family members while here in El Paso. 188 degrees earned by this class, from associate's to master's degree. The renovation of the NCO Heritage and Education Center, which was the Class 65 legacy gift to USASMA. I challenge you all to go make a difference and make a positive impact in your next unit as you've done here. Now it is my great honor to introduce the guest speaker for today's graduation. His bio is in the program, so I'm not going to read it to you. But I will say that he loves being a soldier and an NCO, and enlisted and NCO education is high on his priority list. A hint to you all, if he visits you or your unit, be ready to PT. Please join me in welcoming the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Commandant, for the great introduction there. And just have to recognize a few people before we get started here. And it is critically important because we have all these special guests that have come to see all of our great graduates here to graduate and celebrate this special day. So first, General Sheridan, thanks for being here today. And I was told that your brother is graduating, and that is a true Army family. We have a general officer and a senior non-commissioned officer now in the family. So congratulations to you and your brother. Let's give them a round of applause. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize my friend Dave Davenport and TRADOC Sergeant Major, our TRADOC Sergeant Major in United States Army Training Doctrine Command. Dave, thanks for being here today. Our Commandant, Dennis DeFries, and his lovely wife, ma'am, thanks for being here, and thanks for all the hard work that you do every day down here at the Academy. Frank Grippy was supposed to be here today but could not make it, our former CENTCOM Sergeant Major, but I know I saw Al Usry, our former NORTHCOM Sergeant Major. I know he's somewhere out in the crowd. Al, thanks for being here and supporting us today. Sergeant Major Luther Thomas, our reserve Sergeant Major, is here somewhere. I know I saw him earlier. Luther, thanks for being here today. It's always special to have you with us. And I just want to give a special thanks to all of our international partners and my fellow Sergeant Majors of our international countries. So Warrant Officer Anthony Lysite, Sergeant Major of the Jamaican Army, thank you for being here with us. Warrant Officer Yoshaki Suzuki, Sergeant Major of the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force. And I do apologize if I mispronounce your name, I'm sorry. Command Sergeant Major Petrus Donkers, Sergeant Major of the Royal Netherlands Army. Warrant Officer Krzysztof Godowski, Sergeant Major of the Polish Land Forces. Chief Warrant Officer Ngik Siak Ping, Sergeant Major of the Singaporean Armed Forces. It's great to have all of you here and celebrate this special time with us. And it's great that you can share your nation's experience with our great soldiers. Let's give our international partners a round of applause. So today is a great day to be a soldier. And as a matter of fact, every day is a great day to be a soldier. Now, I almost didn't make it here. There's a lot going on in the DC area. It's Army Birthday Week this week. Lots of ceremonies, lots of things to attend, but I told the Chief of Staff of the Army, I said, sir, this is the most important place for me to be. It's the hardest place to travel to in the United States of America. But it is the most important place for me to be. So there's always a fear that when you sign up to do this, that you may not make it here. But it just so happens that if I didn't, I guess we were going to have the class president come up here and speak in my behalf. But I'm told that he may have choked in the past before, so maybe it was good that I did show up. Where is the class president? Stand up. Where are you at? Let's give that man a round of applause. Let's give him a round of applause. That's tough. I remember our class president is actually still serving too. His name was Command Sergeant Major Zeiser. He's down in Special Operations Command and doing a wonderful job, and we gave him a lot of grief. And so I know what you went through. So I didn't experience myself, but I'm sorry. So on my way here, I ran into the great TRADOC Sergeant Major, and Dave Davenport, well, he was at the airport. We were getting our bags, and he knows me, and he knows I have a tendency to be a bit long-winded. So he looks at me and he says, hey, Sergeant Major, you know, I got a plane to catch tomorrow at 11:30. I said, well, Dave, you might want to call the airline because the Army paid good money to fly me down here. This is my first speech as the SMA at the Academy, and I've had 11 years to perfect my graduation speech, the one I wrote for my grade at the Academy, and I'm up to 24 pages now, Dave. So we're going to be a while. But there might be extra space on my flight, Dave, don't worry. So before we start, just got a quick safety note. All right, so I may need a couple of volunteers to be ready to shield me from the class hug ranger, okay? And we may have some very important things to talk about this afternoon, and I don't want the urge to hug, all right, to take away or detract from that. So you just might have to keep Sergeant Major McGuffey away from me here for a little while. So where is Sergeant Major McGuffey? Where is he? Okay. Wait. Hey, Sergeant Major, matter of fact, let's just get this over with. I know it's going to drag. Come on, come on. So I came from TRADOC, and we hug in TRADOC, right, Dave? That's right. You're doing great things out there. Keep hugging, keep hugging. I give them out as Christmas gifts. My son doesn't like them that much, but it's the gift that keeps on giving all year long, so you keep it up. So now that we got over that, and we got the hugs out, let's talk about a few things. I know you're ready to get out of here. I mean, I really do know it. I know it for a fact. But before you go, it's important that you thoroughly understand my 30-step process to success as a leader. Oh, by the way, you're going to take notes, because I asked the Commandant to extend the course one more day. Oh, and this stuff, your career depends on. I know you've heard that several times. Anyway, back to the 30-step plan. Never think you're too senior to clean the latrine. It's a fact of Army life. All soldiers clean latrines, and it does build character. And I hear that Class 65 built some serious character this past year. Cleaning the loo, as our Brit partners would say, right? That's right. And you're certainly never too senior to participate in a little bit of area beautification. And incidentally, we do appreciate you having to pick up the slack because we had a problem with the contract. And actually, even more incidentally, I want to thank the Commandant for coming up with the fact that we had a contract problem. So, good job, Commandant, as always. But seriously, though, there are just a few things I want you to take away from this discussion. First and foremost, congratulations. You have reached the most senior enlisted rank in the United States Army. Think about that for a second. You should be extremely proud of your accomplishments. Proud of the fact that soldiers and officers alike will call you Sergeants Major. Sounds great, doesn't it? Made it to the top. No more schools, no more promotion board file reviews, no more DA photos, no more riding in the back of the LMTV, and most importantly, no more driving around the PX parking lot looking for a place to park. That's right. Well, stop basking in your damn glory, okay? There's work to be done, Sergeants Major, and your careers do depend on it. But more importantly, our Army and your soldiers, our soldiers, depend on you. They're depending on the fact that you are our most senior stewards of the Army profession. And when those soldiers and officers see that rank, there will be an immediate expectation of what right looks like. As the Sergeant Major, you will be trusted, called upon, confided in, looked up to, expected to know the answers, understand every situation, keep calm when complete chaos is happening, settle all the arguments, understand and rationale the point of view from both sides of the argument. You'll be expected to be a walking textbook for 6.22, 670-1, 600-20, and every other manual that nobody else wants to read. They will remember everything bad that you say, and they'll forget everything that was good. And yes, you are now officially the complaint department. No more whining for you. No. Now you're that person that has to keep everyone happy in the unit. You're the morale NCO. You have to do all this and much, much more. And you will, because we will call you Sergeants Major. Now, I have the utmost confidence that from your leaders over the years, combined with the great tutelage you received over the past year from the USASMA faculty, that you now have the knowledge, skills, and attributes to succeed. But since I'm here, and you don't have your diploma yet, I'm going to take the liberty of giving you just a few tips that I've learned along my journey. I call them my top 10. And this is going to be unlike any other graduation speech you've ever heard. It's probably going to be the best one you've ever heard. But you can take them or leave them. Number 1, yelling doesn't make you skinny. PT does. If you're not out there saluting the flag every morning at 6:30, you can automatically assume that your soldiers aren't either. You have to lead from the front. Soldiers don't care if you're in first place. They just want to see you out there. This is a team sport. I know you've heard me say it. PT might not be the most important thing you do that day, but it is the most important thing you do every day in the United States Army. Bottom line is, wars are won between 6:30 and 9. It is absolutely critical that you get that right. Number 2, I have never regretted taking the distinct opportunity to keep my mouth shut. That's right. Think about what you're going to say before you say it. You're the Sergeant Major. People are going to listen to you. By all means, if you have something important or something informative to add to the discussion, then say it. But don't just talk so people can hear you. For goodness sake, you're embarrassing the rest of us. Sit down and listen sometimes. You might just learn something. Number 3, if you find yourself having to remind everyone all the time that you're the Sergeant Major and you're in charge, you're probably not. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Number 4, you have to work very hard at being more informed and less emotional. Sergeant Majors, I'll put it in simple terms. Nobody likes a dumb, loud mouth. They don't. Take the time to do the research. Learn how to be brief. Listen to people and give everyone the time of day. You never want to go back on a decision. But in the same accord, don't be afraid to either. Everyone makes mistakes, even Sergeant Majors. And you will make less of them if you have time to be more informed. Number 5, if you can't have fun every day, then you need to go home. You are the morale officer. You don't have to be everyone's friend, but you do have to be positive all the time. The Sergeant Major is the one everyone looks to when it's cold, when it's hot, when it's raining, or things are just going south. Your job is to keep the unit together. That's why you're there. The first place they will look when things go bad is you, and they will watch your reaction. Number 6, if soldiers run the other way when you show up, that's actually not cool, okay? Don't be the feared leader. It doesn't work. Most leaders who yell all the time, they're in fact hiding behind their inability to effectively lead. Soldiers and leaders should be seeking you, looking for your guidance, asking you to be their mentors on the Army Career Tracker, not posting jokes about you on the Duffel Bag blog. That's not cool. It's funny, but it's not cool. Number 7, don't do anything, and I mean anything negative, over email. You have to call them. Go see them in person. Email is not a tool. It's just a tool, I'm sorry. It's not a substitute for leadership. It's also permanent. You've all heard it. Once you hit send, it's official, and you can never bring it back. Automatically assume that whatever you write on email will be on the cover of the Army Times and all over Facebook by the end of the week. Trust me, I know this personally. Number 8 happens to be my favorite, and it came from my mother. My mom always used to tell me that if you're not nervous on the first day of school, then you're either not telling the truth, you either don't care, or you're just plain stupid. It's okay to be nervous, Sergeant Majors. All of us are. When we take over new positions, and that's okay. That's what makes you try harder. That's what makes you care more. Once that feeling is gone, once you feel like you have everything figured out, it's time to go home. That's when it's time to leave, because the care stops. Don't do this on your own. You need a battle buddy, people you can trust, people you can call, a mentor that you can confide in, someone that you can relieve stress on. Don't make the same mistakes that someone else has made. Those are the dumb mistakes. Don't do this alone. Number 9, If your own justification for being an expert in everything you do is your 28 years of military experience, then it's time for you to fill out your 4187 and end your military experience. Not everything gets better with age, Sergeant Majors. You have to work at it every day. Remember, you are the walking textbook. You are the information portal. Take the time to keep yourself relevant. Read the emails that I send out. Don't just hit delete. There's a lot of good information in those emails that I'm sure was not covered in your 28 years of military experience. And last but not least, and I mean last but not least, if you take anything away, remember this: never, and I mean never, forget that you're just a soldier. That's all you are. No better than any other, but just one of them. You may get paid a little more, but when the time comes, your job is to treat them all fair, take care of them as if they were your own children, and expect no more from them of that of which you expect from yourself. Now, I could talk to you all day about leadership, but I know you probably won't remember what I say, and I know that for a fact, because I was trying to recall on the way down here who spoke at my graduation, and I don't have a clue. But I'll leave you with this. Despite what you've experienced in the past, a sergeant major's job isn't just to find uniform deficiencies. It's not just to ensure everyone has matching PT belts and make sure everybody stays off the grass. Your job is to lead soldiers, to ensure that they are trained and ready to fight our nation's wars and bring them home again and get them ready for the next adventure. Everything you do from that moment, from the time that we hand you this diploma, should be focused on that, and you will be okay. It starts at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Where will you be? There's a place in front of that flagpole for you. It's your choice. Take it. You've earned it. Good luck. Godspeeds. God bless each and every one of you and your families. We are Army strong. Therefore, this will defend.
During the course of study, each student was evaluated on his or her abilities, aptitude, performance, and potential for assignments of positions of greater responsibility within the Department of Defense. The course is challenging for all. However, in addition to the universal rigors endured by their classmates, 2 graduates bore the additional burden of student leadership. Therefore, before we recognize our award recipients, we would like to recognize our student class leaders and present them with their diplomas. Class President, Sergeant Major James J. Lamberson. Vice President, Sergeant Major Janelle K. Ray. The Association of the United States Army Award for Excellence in Military Writing is presented to the student who most convincingly wrote a paper on an item of current military interest. Presenting the award is the AUSA National Assistant Director for NCO and Soldier Programs and member of the USASMA Hall of Honor, Command Sergeant Major Don Thomas, United States Army retired. Receiving the AUSA Award for Excellence in Military Writing and his diploma is Senior Master Sergeant Michael A. Sundin, United States Air Force Air National Guard. The AUSA Award for Military Excellence in Leadership is presented to the student who displayed unquestionable morals and ethical values, a strong positive attitude, and a professional sense of urgency, all while making a unique contribution to the class. Presenting the award is again Command Sergeant Major Don Thomas. Receiving the AUSA Award for Military Excellence in Leadership and her diploma is Sergeant Major Alicia D. Dunn. The Army Historical Foundation Award for Military History is presented to the student who produced the most thoroughly researched paper concerning an event in military history. The winning paper was selected based upon its merits after a board evaluation. Again, presenting this award is Command Sergeant Major Don Thomas. Receiving the Army Historical Foundation Award for Military History and his diploma is Sergeant Major John R. Thompson. The Altima Physical Fitness Excellence Award is presented to the student who demonstrated the highest degree of physical fitness, motivation, and professionalism. Presenting the award is Sergeant Major of the Army, Daniel Daly. The recipient of the Altima Physical Fitness Excellence Award is Sergeant Major Jennifer A. Francis. The General Ralph E. Haynes Award for Research is presented to the student that produced the most thoroughly researched paper concerning a contemporary issue facing the United States military. Presenting the award, sponsored by the Government Employees Insurance Company, is Command Sergeant Major Dan Lucas, United States Army retired. Receiving the General Ralph E. Haynes Award for Research and her diploma is Senior Master Sergeant Aaron C. McElroy, United States Air Force. The Sergeant Major of the Army, William G. Bainbridge Chair of Ethics Award is presented to the student who wrote most convincingly about the professional military ethic as exemplified by the personal and professional qualities of the 5th Sergeant Major of the Army. Presenting the award is President of the Omar Bradley chapter of the AUSA, Mr. John Bailey. Receiving the Sergeant Major of the Army, William G. Bainbridge Chair of Ethics Award and his diploma is Sergeant Major Clayton C. Grimes, Jr. The National Association for Uniformed Services Selfless Service Award is presented to the student who best exemplified the value of selfless service to fellow soldiers, the Army, and the local community during his or her time at the Academy. Presenting the award is the President of the El Paso chapter of the National Association of Uniformed Service, Command Sergeant Major Sylvester Smith, United States Army retired. Receiving the Selfless Service Award is Sergeant Major Denise A. Underwood. The International Student Excellence Award is presented to the international student who excelled above all others in field studies program participation, academic achievement, and essay presentation. Presenting the award is the Director of the Sergeant Major's Academy International Military Student Office, Command Sergeant Major Michael Huffman, United States Army retired. Receiving the International Student Excellence Award from Australia is Warrant Officer 1, Darren J. Murch. The following senior non-commissioned officers, having successfully completed all requirements set forth by the Sergeants Major Academy, will now receive their diplomas. We ask that you hold your applause and cheers until all graduates have been announced. Sergeant Major Timothy L. Abrahamson.
Sergeant Major Brian P. Zamiska.
Sergeant Major Muhammad Ali Ahmadi from Afghanistan.
Sergeant Major Munimicha Uasa from Japan.
Sergeant Major David J. Ahola.
Sergeant Major Nathan D. York.
Sergeant Major Aaron P. Alexander.
Sergeant Major Lee K. Yoniyama.
Sergeant Major Dusty R. Alexander.
First Sergeant Gerardo C. Ibarra, Sr., United States Marine Corps.
Sergeant Major David L. Allegretti.
Sergeant Major Robert Yanez.
Sergeant Major Mahmoud Juma Al Nassan from Jordan.
Sergeant Major Daniel L. Reitzman.
First Sergeant Christopher S. Amancio, United States Marine Corps.
Sergeant Major Jason P. Wright.
Sergeant Major Benny B. Anderson.
Sergeant Major Howard A. Wright III.
Sergeant Major Stephen D. Anderson.
Sergeant Major Mark Wrench.
Sergeant Major Eric C. Andres.
Sergeant Major Jeremy L. Wood.
Sergeant Major Joseph J. Anthony.
Warrant Officer 4, Andre Boltman from Poland.
Sergeant Major Veronica E. Ash.
Sergeant Major Randall L. Wise.
Sergeant Major Michael A. Bikini.
Sergeant Major Devin Winnigan.
Sergeant Major Miguel A. Baez Jr.
Sergeant Major William D. Wilson.
Master Sergeant Gary W. Bailey.
Sergeant Major Silas Williams.
Warrant Officer 2, Gerald C. Baker from Jamaica.
Sergeant Major Delaric D. Williams.
Sergeant Major Kenneth W. Ball.
Sergeant Major Darvin T. Williams.
Sergeant Major Amari D. Ballou.
Sergeant Major Christopher J. Williams.
Sergeant Major David E. Banks.
Sergeant Major Alonzo K. Williams.
Sergeant Major Jose A. Banks.
Sergeant Major Troy M. Willie.
Sergeant Major Thomas M. Barone.
Sergeant Major Keisha R. White.
Sergeant Major Linwood E. Barrett, Jr.
Sergeant Major Weston M. West.
Sergeant Major Richard L. Balcom, Jr.
Sergeant Major Christopher J. Werner.
Sergeant Major Jarrett W. Bearden.
Sergeant Major Roger G. Watts.
Sergeant Major Thomas G. Bebout.
Command Sergeant Major Nassar Ahmed Watandos from Afghanistan.
Sergeant Major Angela M. Beckford.
Sergeant Major Conrad Walters.
Sergeant Major William E. Behrens.
First Sergeant Timothy Walsh from Sweden.
Sergeant Major Brian W. Bell.
Sergeant Major Charles T. Walden.
Master Sergeant Michael R. Byer.
Sergeant Major Mercedes D. Wagner.
Sergeant Major John P. Beely.
Sergeant Major William S. D. Vernon.
First Warrant Officer Omar bin Osman from Singapore.
Sergeant Major Timothy W. Vaughn.
Sergeant Major Jametta A. Bland.
Sergeant Major Thomas R. Vatcher, Jr.
Sergeant Major Ronnie E. Blount, Jr.
Sergeant Major Jose G. Vasquez.
Sergeant Major John M. Bond.
Sergeant Major Dennis M. Funde Weingart from the Netherlands.
Sergeant Major Rebecca M. Booker.
Sergeant Major Michael S. Udell.
Sergeant Major James J. Brasher.
Sergeant Major Kevin Tyson.
Sergeant Major Torrance R. Braswell, Sr.
Sergeant Major Marcus A. Twine.
Sergeant Major Kenneth W. Breeding.
Sergeant Major Joseph W. Traylor.
Sergeant Major John T. Brennan.
Sergeant Major Jesse M. Townsend.
Sergeant Major William B. Briggs.
Sergeant Major Brenda F. Towner.
Sergeant Major James E. Bristow.
Sergeant Major Alicio Torres.
Sergeant Major Christopher S. Broadus.
Master Sergeant Samuel Tlumac.
Sergeant Major Jeremy J. Brockway.
Sergeant Major Joseph A. Tinker.
Sergeant Major Louis A. Brown III.
Sergeant Major Darrell R. Teague.
Sergeant Major Edward J. Bryant.
Master Sergeant Sharon D. Thompson Taylor.
Sergeant Major James L. Bryant.
Sergeant Major Travis K. Thompson.
Sergeant Major Jose C. Bueno Signs.
Sergeant Major Shatan C. Thomas.
Sergeant Major Astrolita B. Boseco.
Sergeant Major Jonathan Than.
Sergeant Major Kiki R. Bunton.
Sergeant Major Chantanet D. Telepac.
Sergeant Major Michael C. Burns.
Sergeant Major Filson Tavernier.
Sergeant Major Kathy A. Burt.
Master Sergeant Jason D. Taft.
Sergeant Major James C. Butler.
Master Sergeant Teresa A. Sweeney.
Sergeant Major Kawan L. Butler.
Command Sergeant Major Ivan Shushinyata from Slovenia.
Sergeant Major Jerry H. Bird, Jr.
Master Sergeant Mladen Sumik from Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Sergeant Major Sophia A. Cabell.
Sergeant Major Scott T. Suter.
Sergeant Major Gloria J. Kane.
Sergeant Major Elian C. Strawn.
Sergeant Major Jennifer J. Calicut.
Sergeant Major Walter Stevens, Jr.
Sergeant Major Gregory A. Camacho Vera.
Sergeant Major Christopher P. Stevens.
Sergeant Major Dion R. Cannon.
Sergeant Major Reginald L. Sterling.
Sergeant Major Carlos Cano III.
Sergeant Major Jason K. Stenback.
Master Sergeant Gerald S. Capo Gonzalez.
Sergeant Major Michael K. Starrett.
Sergeant Major Jeremy J. Carey.
Sergeant Major Escolithia S. Stackhouse.
Sergeant Major Warren M. Carriazo.
Master Sergeant Marcus A. Stacy.
Sergeant Major Mark E. Carl.
Sergeant Major Jeffrey K. St. John.
Sergeant Major Stephen A. Carney Jr.
Sergeant Major Michael J. Spear.
Sergeant Major Mary A. Carr.
Sergeant Major Aaron J. Spall.
Sergeant Major John N. Cavalier.
Sergeant Major James V. Southern.
Sergeant Major David M. Kavanaugh.
Sergeant Major Lonnie R. Sorensen.
Sergeant Major Paul A. Sarabone.
Sergeant Major Roger Solano, Jr.
Sergeant Major Jeffrey D. Chambers.
Sergeant Major Daniel L. Snyder.
Sergeant Major Rosalba D. Chambers.
Sergeant Major Jeffrey D. Snipes.
Sergeant Major Wilford M. Chap Delane.
Sergeant Major Kenneth M. Snap.
Command Sergeant Major In Jae Che from South Korea.
Sergeant Major Stephen J. Smith.
Sergeant Major Dominica V. Christian.
Sergeant Major Roy B. Smith.
First Warrant Officer Chua Hong Hup from Singapore.
Sergeant Major Hayward K. Smith.
Sergeant Major Carlos Clausel.
Sergeant Major Bradford L. Smith.
Sergeant Major Harry C. Cleveland.
Command Sergeant Major Peter I. Semyonov from Bulgaria.
Sergeant Major Joshua C. Coble.
Sergeant Major Akram M. Shahid.
Sergeant Major Francina E. Collins.
Sergeant Major Laura C. Shade.
Sergeant Major James E. Combs.
Sergeant Major Juan C. Serato.
Sergeant Major Alexis E. Connor.
Sergeant Major Albert Serrano.
Sergeant Major Justin A. Connor.
Sergeant Major Mark G. Selby.
Sergeant Major Thomas D. Connor.
Sergeant Major Johnny C. Wright, Jr.
Sergeant Major Derek M. Cook, Sr.
First Sergeant Paul A. Schuster, United States Marine Corps.
First Sergeant Sherry N. Cook, United States Marine Corps.
Sergeant Major Jonathan M. Shine.
Sergeant Major Ronald D. Corella.
Sergeant Major Patrick J. Savage.
Sergeant Major Pablo Coronado III.
Sergeant Major Julie A. Serrano.
Sergeant Major Shane M. Corshane.
Sergeant Major Art Jason Q. Santos.
Master Sergeant Donald E. Covert.
Sergeant Major Daniel A. Santiago Alonso.
Sergeant Major Jerry M. Cowart Jr.
Sergeant Major Armando Saldana.
Sergeant Major Kimala D. Cox.
Sergeant Major Jimmy L. Sadler.
Sergeant Major Jesse F. Crawford.
Sergeant Major Russell S. Sabins.
Sergeant Major Aubrey L. Crenshaw Jr.
Sergeant Major Amadeo Russo from Italy.
Sergeant Major Todd A. Crowfoot.
Sergeant Major Matt Ruan.
Sergeant Major James M. Crozer.
Master Sergeant Wilbert J. Roussel Jr.
Sergeant Major Augustine Cruz.
Sergeant Major Sean K. Rosignol.
Sergeant Major Jose A. Cruz Ortiz.
Sergeant Major Michael J. Rosenberger.
Sergeant Major Carl J. Cunningham.
Sergeant Major Timothy J. Ross.
Sergeant Major Ariel R. Custodio.
Sergeant Major Luis F. Romero.
Sergeant Major Andrea M. Daly.
Sergeant Major Rajan A. Robinson.
Sergeant Major Anthony T. Davis.
Sergeant Major Patrick E. Roberson.
Sergeant Major John N. Devine.
Sergeant Major Victor M. Rivera.
Master Sergeant Agnes Q. Diaz.
Sergeant Major Jacqueline D. Rivera.
Sergeant Major Jose L. Diaz.
Sergeant Major Humberto Rivera III.
Sergeant Major Joseph R. DiMaggio.
Master Sergeant Dennis M. Reisenbrei from the Netherlands.
Sergeant Major Brandon C. Dimmick.
Sergeant Major Paul J. Rick.
Sergeant Major Dennis N. Dodge.
Sergeant Major of the Army William E. Richmond from Guyana.
Sergeant Major Jason M. Dodge.
Sergeant Major William J. Richards III.
Master Sergeant Nita P. Domingo from the Philippines.
Sergeant Major Deborah D. Rome.
Sergeant Major Thomas B. Donahue.
Sergeant Major Cecil V. Reynolds.
Sergeant Major Gregory D. Dorsey.
Sergeant Major Terrence D. Reyes Jr.
Sergeant Major David M. Dubeck.
Sergeant Major Christian X. Riquelme.
Sergeant Major Donald Day Doucette.
Sergeant Major John M. Rabine.
Sergeant Major Tom A. Dow Jr.
Sergeant Major Dante L. Reese.
Sergeant Major Kenneth B. Drury.
Sergeant Major Eric C. Rees.
Sergeant Major Derek D. Durham.
Sergeant Major Danny Rebelledo.
Master Sergeant Timothy J. Durr.
Sergeant Major William D. Ray IV.
Sergeant Major Michael F. Eddy.
Sergeant Major Tony E. Randolph.
Sergeant Major Jelani A. Edwards.
Sergeant Major Arturo Ramos.
Sergeant Major John D. Eldridge.
Sergeant Major Robert L. Ramirez.
Sergeant Major George G. Elsesser, Jr.
Sergeant Major Lloyd E. Perswell.
Sergeant Major Bobby R. Estrada.
First Sergeant Wesley A. Purnell, United States Marine Corps.
Sergeant Major Devin Q. Evans.
Sergeant Major John W. Proctor.
Sergeant Major John J. Fair.
Sergeant Major James J. Prassey.
Sergeant Major Michael R. Fetzer.
Sergeant Major Uriah S. Pope.
Sergeant Major Anderson Fetzer Rodriguez from Brazil.
Sergeant Major William D. Poist, Jr.
Sergeant Major David J. Fisk.
Sergeant Major Mark E. Poindexter.
Sergeant Major Anika M. Ford.
Sergeant Major Chad L. Pinkston.
Sergeant Major Darrell A. Forsyth.
Sergeant Major Benjamin E. Pingle.
Sergeant Major Haneri Franco Oliveira dos Nascimento from Brazil.
Sergeant Major Daniel J. Pimentel.
Master Sergeant Marcel Frano from the Slovak Republic.
Sergeant Major Brian M. Pfeiffer.
Sergeant Major Douglas W. Galick.
Sergeant Major Kevin E. Pyatt.
Sergeant Major Alex S. Garcia.
Sergeant Major Cynthia A. Perryman.
Sergeant Major Teo Dulo A. Garcia.
Sergeant Major Brandon J. Perry.
Sergeant Major Andrew Garati.
Sergeant Major Peter P. Perkins.
Sergeant Major Gilbert J. Garrett.
Sergeant Major Lily D. Perrine.
Sergeant Major Brandon T. Gentry.
Master Chief Petty Officer Jamal A. Pereira, United States Coast Guard.
Sergeant Major Luzmila V. George.
Sergeant Major Jose A. Perdomo Basto from Colombia.
Sergeant Major Francisco J. Gonzalez.
Warrant Officer 1 Grant I.J. Payton from New Zealand.
Sergeant Major Keith D. Gordon, Jr.
Sergeant Major Lawrence S. Payne.
Sergeant Major Leonard D. Graham.
Sergeant Major Martin Pals.
Sergeant Major Oronde A. Grant.
Sergeant Major Deborah M. Patterson.
Sergeant Major Michael C. Gray.
Sergeant Major James P. Perry.
Sergeant Major Michael Greenfield.
Sergeant Major Maurice D. Parker.
Sergeant Major Jeffrey J. Grilla.
Sergeant Major Rodney Parker.
Sergeant Major Ronald B. Grove.
Sergeant Major Darnielle C. Parker.
Sergeant Major Kristen L. Grover.
Sergeant Major Reginald Parham.
Sergeant Major William E. Haddon.
Sergeant Major Anthony T. Pamplin.
Sergeant Major Nicole M. Haynes.
Sergeant Major Anthony A. Palmore.
Sergeant Major Rochelle E. Hairston.
Sergeant Major Michael L. Palm.
Sergeant Major Vernell Hall.
Sergeant Major Tomas G. Pacheco Jr.
Sergeant Major Quintina J. Hankins.
Sergeant Major Gerald L. Outlaw.
Sergeant Major Joseph G. Harbor.
Sergeant Major William G. Ott.
Sergeant Major Kevin D. Harkey.
Sergeant Major Brian Otero.
Sergeant Major Michael P. Harlan.
Sergeant Major Wilfredo Ortiz Reyes.
Sergeant Major Albert H. Harris.
Sergeant Major John A. Orbe.
Sergeant Major Robert F. Harris.
Sergeant Major Hugh N. Oney Jr.
Sergeant Major Vicky M. Harris.
Sergeant Major Eric B. Olson.
Sergeant Major Zachariah T. Harris.
Sergeant Major Michael L. Oliver.
Senior Master Sergeant Christopher L. Harvey, United States Air Force.
Sergeant Major Brian M. O'Leary.
Sergeant Major Gregory W. Harvey.
Sergeant Major Rodney D. Odell.
Sergeant Major George T. Harwick.
Sergeant Major Eric E. Oakes.
Sergeant Major Gary D. Harwood.
Sergeant Major James G. O'Brien.
Sergeant Major Julius L. Horn, Jr.
Master Sergeant Jovitska Novetsky from Macedonia.
Sergeant Major Sean M. Horval.
Sergeant Major Abua E. Newville.
Master Sergeant Christopher L. Howard, United States Marine Corps.
Sergeant Major Roosevelt Nettles, Jr.
Sergeant Major Christopher D. Hughes.
Sergeant Major William V. Neal, Jr.
Sergeant Major Rolando R. Hunt.
Sergeant Major Julio C. Nazario.
Sergeant Major Ahan A. Hunter.
Master Sergeant Iso Nakamura from Japan.
Sergeant Major Ian A. Hutchinson.
Sergeant Major James I. Muznicki.
Sergeant Major Carol L. Himes.
Sergeant Major Mario L. Murray.
Sergeant Major James L. Isles.
Master Sergeant Oscar J. Mullinax, Jr.
First Sergeant Osman In from Turkey.
Sergeant Major Eric F. Mulison.
Sergeant Major Warner N. Irvin, Jr.
Master Sergeant Lawrence K. Tameo Kanea from Malawi.
Sergeant Major Michael Jackson.
Sergeant Major Murphy Morissette.
Sergeant Major Michelle J. Jackson.
Sergeant Major Carl J. Morehouse.
Sergeant Major Todd V. Jackson.
Sergeant Major Alvaro D. Morales.
Sergeant Major Todd A. Yeager.
Sergeant Major Robert G. Moore.
Sergeant Major Levan Yakashvili from Georgia.
Sergeant Major Davis S. Moore.
Sergeant Major Chad M. Johnson.
Sergeant Major Daniel R. Moore.
Sergeant Major Howard T. Johnson.
Sergeant Major Castine P. Montoya.
Sergeant Major Michelle R. Johnson.
Sergeant Major Evelyn Monte Alegre.
Sergeant Major Roderick R. Johnson.
Master Sergeant Mario F. Miranda.
Sergeant Major Antoine T. Jones.
Sergeant Major Michael G. Mills.
Sergeant Major Jacqueline K. Jones.
Sergeant Major Kevin C. Miller.
Sergeant Major Fergus J. Joseph.
Sergeant Major Carlos E. Miller.
Master Sergeant Darlene P. Kamai.
Sergeant Major Tara L. Mickelson.
Master Sergeant Zdenko Kadasek from Croatia.
Sergeant Major Marcus T. Meyer from Germany.
Sergeant Major James D. Keister.
Sergeant Major Ruben Mraz.
Sergeant Major Sean D. Keene.
Master Sergeant Philip Morans from Germany.
Master Sergeant Kelly L. Kelly.
Sergeant Major Elvin Medina.
Sergeant Major Yvette M. Kennedy.
Sergeant Major Carlos J. Moe.
Sergeant Major Rabion Copolo from Botswana.
Sergeant Major James R. Meade.
Sergeant Major Brandon T. Kilgo.
Sergeant Major George W. McVeigh III.
Sergeant Major Sung J. Kim.
Sergeant Major Jason J. McRoberts.
Sergeant Major Dolores P. Kiyoshi.
Sergeant Major James M. McGuffey.
Sergeant Major Bradley V. Knapp.
Sergeant Major Timothy J. McDaniel.
Master Sergeant Milas Koger from Estonia.
Sergeant Major Jason D. McCoy.
Sergeant Major Christopher R. Kahunsky.
Sergeant Major Jesse McGowan.
Sergeant Major of the Army of Montenegro, Vladin Kojic.
Sergeant Major Michael R. McCabe.
Master Sergeant Ricky L. Kolvik.
Sergeant Major Patrick M. Morin.
Sergeant Major Derek G. Cookies.
Sergeant Major Christopher M. Matthews.
Sergeant Major Barry E. Kalinsky.
Sergeant Major Jermaine S. Mason.
Sergeant Major Matthew E. Kunk.
Sergeant Major Omar A. Mascarenas.
Sergeant Major Matthew E. Ladd.
Sergeant Major Michael P. Martineau.
Sergeant Major Stephen R. Lake.
Sergeant Major Wendell V. Marshall.
Sergeant Major Scott A. Lambert.
Master Sergeant Darius Morosas from Lithuania.
Sergeant Major Jelita L. Lanier.
Sergeant Major Jesse O. Mariaca.
Sergeant Major Victor J. Laragione Jr.
Sergeant Major Adrian D. Madsen.
Sergeant Major Stephen J. Larock.
Sergeant Major Donovan P. Masiak.
Sergeant Major Harold A. Lawrence.
Sergeant Major Raymond M. Mabry.
Sergeant Major Larry R. Lawson.
Sergeant Major Dietrich G. Louie.
Sergeant Major Carrie A. Lee.
Sergeant Major Rodolfo Lopez.
Sergeant Major David E. Lee.
Sergeant Major Jeffrey L. Long.
Sergeant Major John J. Lee.
Sergeant Major Robert N. Launders.
Sergeant Major Jeremy S. Lorette.
Sergeant Major Jeffrey A. Lohr.
Sergeant Major Cedric C. Lewis Sr.
Sergeant Major Ronnie B. Littler.
Sergeant Major Richard A. Lewis.
Master Sergeant Sotne Lipertelliani from Georgia.
Sergeant Major Wayne L. Lewis, Jr.
Sergeant Major Damon Lindsay.
Sergeant Major James L. Light, Jr. Sergeant Major William A. Lilly. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that we present the graduates of Sergeant's Major Course, Class 65. On behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of the Sergeant's Major Academy, the class president is presenting Sergeant Major of the Army Daly with a token of appreciation.
The Academy again would like to thank all of our guests and community partners for being here today. We would also like to thank the 1st Armored Division Band for yet another great performance. And finally, we'd like to give special thanks to the Neiman family and the Abundant Faith Living Center for allowing us to utilize this beautiful facility. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the playing of the Army Song and the departure of the official party. The staff and faculty of the Sergeant Major Academy offers its sincerest congratulations to the graduates of Class 65 and wish you all good luck and safe travels. Thank you. Good day.